good things, Walt.
Okay, well, hi everyone. My name is Kaylin Wood, and I am a business administration student here at USC, as well as pursuing my master's degree in music industry. I'm so thankful to have you all join us for this Industry Insights event. So once again, welcome. Um, Before we begin, I want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded. So this event is designed to give students the opportunity to explore different career options, and we want to start with panel introductions and just to introduce you all to our panelists. So I can change the slide real quick. So actually, let's go over our agenda. We're going to do introductions, a quick panel discussion moderated by me. It's more of a formal Q&A with preset questions, and then we'll open up the floor to students and you all can ask questions, which will be facilitated through the chat function on Zoom. You can also use the raise hand feature. And then we'll do closing remarks at the end. So if our panelists want to introduce ourselves, Walt, if you want to go first.
Hi, everybody. My name is Walt DeJong. I work for the Walt Disney Company, specifically for the studio, under the segment of marketing special events, technical production. And so my role is manager of cinema and event video production. That long title essentially means that I'm the tech nerd that handles the premieres, conventions, meetings, and so forth like that for picture and sound and any technical direction of the event. So that's the long story short on that one.
Perfect. Andy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Cool, yeah, thank you. My name is Andy Myers. I am a director and I'm the owner of a production company called M3 Creative. I graduated in 91. I worked at a show called Entertainment Tonight for 13 years. And then I started this company in 2003, and we mostly handle marketing materials for companies like Disney, like Netflix, like Amazon, FX, the list goes on. And we've done a couple of feature films as well.
Perfect. And Andrew?
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Taw. I'm a very recent grad of USC, actually graduated back in May, so just a few months ago, starting my first full-time job. Currently working at Red Bull, but specifically the media house portion of it. And I specifically do media programming strategy for them. So that's basically just social media output, and then strategizing for in-person events would be the short log line for that.
Cool. Perfect. Thank you so much. So we're going to move into the moderated Q&A, and I have a few questions for our panelists, the first being for Andrew. So as a recent graduate of USC, were there any specific organizations that you joined that inspired you to pursue entertainment specifically? And how did your experience at SC prepare you for your current role at Red Bull?
Mm-hmm. I would say one organization that I would highly recommend everyone to join is the Student Alumni Society. That's one of the largest organizations on campus, but essentially as a student, you get to just go to a bunch of mixers and in-person dinners with alumni. And that's something that I did since I came in person sophomore year at USC. So that was super awesome. And then once you're a member of the Student Alumni Society, you can apply to be a part of Society 53. And that was also a super impactful experience. Each of us got to have a mentor who's on the USC Board of Governors. So mine, she actually worked for Disney. So I don't know if Walt knows her, but her name's Heather. She used to be the VP of comms. So it's really cool to have someone who is such a high up position at such a prestigious entertainment company kind of hold my hand, tell me what I should be doing and all of that. So I would say that was one of the biggest things. And then as far as what prepared me, I had a minor in the School of Cinematic Arts, the entertainment industry minor, and I feel I just picked classes that kind of set me up for success. A lot of them were more of the business focused ones, so those are really great. And then combining that with my Annenberg degree, the communication degree, I think that was super helpful. And then lastly, I think just this, going to Career Center. I went to the Annenberg Career Center very frequently, probably every few weeks, all throughout senior year. Always got my resume checked. I used VMock, the online resume checker, to just make sure everything was all in a line, all of that. So just make sure you access all the resources that USC has to offer, because there's so many. So I would say that would probably be the biggest thing that prepared me for full time.
And then you said that you got your undergrad in communications and now you're working for a big media company for Red Bull. How how would you say that experience prepared you for your role as well?
I would say, and so I used to be a tour guide at USC as well. And one thing I would say about the School of Communication, is that we learned a lot of like soft skills. I think a lot of schools at USC are very like hard skills, like you're learning like chemistry or like physics. Whereas like in Annenberg, I think we learned how to like interview well, pitch well, things like that. And I think those were the skills that best prepared me for like my interviews. And also like now that I'm here, I like continue to network like laterally all across the company. I ask people who work in our international offices for coffee chats. And I think just like that soft skill of knowing how to like interact with people once you're actually at that next step, would be one of the biggest things I learned. So I would say soft skills were like some of my favorite things I took away from Annenberg.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I have a question for Andy as well. So as the owner of M3 Creative, as well as a director and writer, what would you say some of the challenges are in your role in terms of dealing with film production, as well as so many major clients, or just dealing with a lot of people in general?
I mean, have you guys been reading the news about the entertainment industry lately? I mean, it's nuts, you know. I mean, it truly is. This is a crazy time in our business. So many people have been laid off. So, I mean, I think it's just the same thing that Andrew was talking about. It's just like, you know, it's just staying connected with people and, you know, making relationships and keeping those relationships and really truly being invested in those relationships, you know, like wanting to do great work for great people and following up with those people and really caring about, you know, their well-being, where they are, how they're doing, and just staying, you know, just keep hustling. I mean, that's what I learned at SE, and that's the same kind of stuff we still have to do, however many years it's been.
And was there a specific experience that made you want to start M3 Creative?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I worked on a show for 13 years, and that was brutal. I had to be there at 5:30 in the morning. I didn't get home till like 7:30 at night. I mean, it gave me a lot of opportunity, which is great, but you know, I learned that for me at least, it's like I want to work, you know, having my own company is better than working for another company. I mean, that's just me, obviously, and it is really hard. You know, it's a 24/7 job, but you know, I mean, I think for me, like I learned that's what it takes, and I'd rather be doing it for myself than for, you know, a corporation. No offense, Walt.
No, it's okay.
Moving on to Walt, as someone who works in event production, can you explain the benefits of having a strong technical background and how that has aided you in your current role for Disney?
Well, I did not attend USC. I did attend different universities because starting young, I started my background in technical theater, started at age of 15. I've been in this business a little over 40 plus years.
Wow.
But so to answer your question specifically, I found that events are a different version of theater and theater production, whether it be television, film, events. It's all based on production. And I feel that if you have a strong background in technical production from theater, your segue into film or into television or into events is a much easier pathway than going backwards. Yes, every discipline has their own specific needs and characteristics, but the basic platforms of the fundamentals are all the same. So lighting is lighting, you know, audio, staging, rigging, stage management, video production. A lot of it is based on technical theater, and I'm not an actor, but it's important to understand how actors move, and that, of course, plays into all types of performances. So I believe that's important. And being where Andy is, I was a contractor for 20 years. I own my own business and working for another studio, specifically as a contractor, and that gained me a world of experience and accessibility. I feel that if people can not only keep their relationships alive from their past experiences, they should also keep in mind to not burn a bridge, because you never know when you're going to come back and work for those individuals again. They may be your boss. You just never know.
100%.
But it's important. Relationships are important. Networking is important, but you should never stop learning. I don't stop learning, and I've been lucky for where I am right now, working on the forefront of technology and film, specifically in digital cinema and so forth. And so with that, I couldn't have done that if I didn't spread the wings and try not only working for someone, working for yourself. What I call my decrescendo of my career, coming back to Disney in 2018. My hope is to stay here until I retire. So it's a great company.
It is.
Thank you so much. Now I have a few just kind of general questions that might be helpful for our students just to gain some more insight about going into this industry. So my first question, and this is open to anyone who would like to answer, what advice do you have for students who recently decided that working in entertainment is something they want to do but don't have the necessary experience, or previous experience in general? What advice do you have for them in order to start pursuing that?
I can start. I recently attended a seminar as an observer for USITT. I believe it's a United States Institute for Theater Technology. Recently at Cal State Fullerton, they were hosting it. And it was put on by Disney Live Entertainment as part of a partnership. And it was I wanted to see what people were interested, because a lot of them were asking the same questions. How do I get into the industry without being in the industry before? I've taken all this academia classes. I've worked, or they work part-time. Maybe they're PAs. Maybe they're working in their own school, help supporting their events or their shows. But they, of course, want to get into the professional realm. I think one of the realities is to understand expectations. Being in the academia world and working myself working in it for quite a while, for many years, it's a different ball of wax getting from that environment into the working world. And one of the things that was brought up was, again, expectations. And a lot of individuals I've heard wanted to do the things they were doing in school, meaning design, or doing some type of a higher elevated job, of which an employer that's working doesn't know this individual. So they're not going to put them on high-end shows in a high-level position without working with them before. A lot of times they'll start at the bottom, work their way up to understand how not only the company sees that individual, but also how that individual sees the company. So to see how that partnership works out, see if there's a good fit, and see if there's any growth for either one of them. And one of the comments that I thought stuck well was lighting. Let's talk about lighting, for example. Someone wants to be a light designer, or they did a lot of that in school, but they want to go out now and do that in the world. Well, in order to do that, there's a lot of things that they need to know that's beyond what's in school. And a lot of that is hands-on experience. They do that from the people that's working in the field. So a lot of times they'll push boxes. They'll understand how methods work, shop prep, the transportation logistics, power, laying cable, even proper coil lift cable. Simple things that people need to understand and know how to work in this field, and how it translates will also work then better into the employer saying, okay, I see this person's hungry. I see that they want to learn, and that they are asking good questions, and that they're retaining these questions and answers. And then by that, it just keeps building. And now other people in the industry will get to see them, whether it be in lighting or cross-platform into audio or staging or rigging. They get to see how other people work, and they go, I like this guy. I remember this person or this gal. They're talented. And so that's how they meet people. That's part of the networking. But they got to start and understand they have to start in at the beginning, at the bottom floor first. It's very difficult to start it at a higher level without knowing anybody, and without anybody knowing what kind of work you do.
I mean, to Walt's point, it's like you're working for people want to keep their jobs. So they're going to hire you because they, to make sure that they can't keep their jobs and to make them look good. And so when you're out there, you need to keep that top of mind. Like, your job is to make them look good.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, and then also another thing that I would add is to make sure you network laterally as well. I actually started off my experience at USC doing like psychology pre-med. And so I was one of those people that like didn't know I wanted to do entertainment from the jump. And one thing that I did was I just asked students who were literally just 1 year above me who were doing these internships that I wanted to do. And asked like what their process was like, how they like decide that was for them. So don't think that like you can only network with like execs or like these people who have like really lofty titles. You can also network with people who are just 1 or 2 steps ahead of you as well.
Or I don't, or you know, or below you. It's just like,
Mm.
like Walt said, like anyone can be your boss in 10 years, you know what I mean, or 5 years, or tomorrow. Like you should just be a good person with everybody and try to be nice to everybody and just work your butt off, and good things will happen. It may kind of suck on the way, but ultimately it should work out.
Right.
I think a lot of what I've discovered too is working on events, is that I think half the job is showing up on time or actually early and knowing where to go, and understanding the instruction. Uh, Basically, not talking unless you have a question, listen, learn, and observe. Mimic as much as you can, stay safe, and work smart. Um, uh, Believe it or not, the people that stay quiet are the ones that actually get noticed. It's the people that talk too much or on the job, like they're gossiping or just shooting the breeze. Those are the type of individuals don't get called back because it doesn't show that they're serious about the job. Because that's that phrase of time is money. It's expensive. And with the post-pandemic now, where people that have worked in our industry for so many years and have lost their livelihood, have had to find a different means of making an income, there is a big open hole for experienced and talented people in the industry. So there's lots of opportunity, but with that opportunity, you need to understand how to interact with people and to understand the different personalities, because I'm telling you, it's the gamut in this industry. So
This is true.
Yes, building connections is definitely incredibly important and just networking where you can. Kind of similar to my last question, I think we touched on it a little bit, but what advice would you give to students actively searching for internships or opportunities within the industry? Are there any specific recommendations that any of you have?
Yeah, I mean, try to start in the world, you know, that you want to get into. You know, if you want to get into being on set, you know, try to find a company that gets on set, you know, like it's easy to get kind of like sidelined into a different career path, and then you know people, but then you don't know the people doing what you want to do. So, you know, definitely try to focus on that. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but like I've met with people, we were just talking to someone for one of our jobs, and she's I think like 23, and she's already done like 7 internships. Like that's what I think everyone should be doing, just, you know, working your butt off and just trying to meet people.
there's I know at Disney, they have internship programs, and it is under the jobs website. I don't remember what the website link is, but we have an intern right now that had joined us right at in around March or so, and is currently still with us on the events team. She's a recent graduate, and has worked in our industry, where she works as an event coordinator. And with that event coordinator role, she got exposed to pretty much in depth with working events like our premiere of Inside Out 2. We had a big convention called D23. She was really heavily involved with that, along with other premieres that we've had recently. It's a lot of deep dive, in-depth experience, and it's paid too. And so I know there's certain criteria that's required to be an intern at Disney, at least. But going outside of Disney, if you can go into the union halls, depending on which craft you want to look at, you should go in there and ask their people there what kind of internships they offer. Or when their job board opens up for applications, because again, the unions are also looking for skilled labor or even unskilled labor that want to learn. It's a great way to start, but it's hard. And I have to say it this way: if it was easy, everybody would do it. It's not easy. you got to have a mindset for it.
Also, one more thing to add about like what Walt said about the last question about being on time. I think that there's a lot of like student jobs that you can have that can teach you like those skills. When I did like the tour guide thing, they would always tell us like early is on time is late. So like these other student jobs that you might have will teach you those skills that will make you successful like in the industry. And another thing is like you don't have to have like the exact like experience that they are looking for. It could also just be like you had experience in a school project, like you decided to do a project surrounding something, you did a case study on your own. It doesn't necessarily have to be a formal internship. So when I got my first internship in the entertainment industry, which was at Paramount, I like that's what I did. All of my examples that I gave them were things that I did in the classroom or through my student jobs. So like don't count those things out and just like kind of have those in the back of your head as things you can say in an interview.
Those are all really good points. And I think just as a student also actively searching for internships, definitely something that I think is useful for everyone. And this is kind of like the last general question, another one to just kind of get more background information about your roles and how you got into the industry. Was working in a creative industry always the goal when thinking about your career, or was there something else that you kind of considered previously?
I mean, for me, I majored in broadcast journalism. And then somehow I got an internship at Entertainment Tonight, which really isn't journalism. But yeah, I mean, I think now that I've been in it for 30 something years, like it is so much fun. You know, I couldn't imagine myself working in any other industry for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, like I mentioned, I started off as like a pre-med student at USC, so I definitely didn't think I was going to be in entertainment. But now that I'm in it, it definitely is just like a super fun place to be. Like I was telling Walt and Kaylin before like everyone joined this call, but we literally were having like a party from 2 to 5 in like our outdoor area over there. So there's just like there's a lot of just like and then you get to say you're working on like all these like fun projects. I'm sure like with like Walt and Andy, I'm doing a lot of stuff like Disney and Marvel. You get to be like I'm attached to like all these cool titles. And so people who are in other industries, I feel like just don't have that. And then also one thing I've heard a lot, specifically like when I did Paramount and Nickelodeon last summer, was that like at the end of the day, like no one's dying like as a result of your work. And I think that was something really cool to hear is that like it's just like something that's like very reassuring. Like, yes, your work is important, but no one dies if a deadline's not met. And I think that was something that kind of just like stuck with me was just to take a little chill pill as well. So I think that's another thing that I'm very thankful about being in the entertainment adjacent industry.
Well, I started off in technical theater, as I mentioned earlier, stayed in it for 20 years. My interest has always been into technology and the toys that go along with it. And it just so happened that entertainment tech was the way to go. I had a side career in law enforcement for 10 years, doing this concurrently, and then joined back into it specifically in the late 90s. There's a theater in LA called the El Capitan Theater. I opened it up as its first technical director with a movie called A Bug's Life and Tarzan, doing those premieres. And so that was my first foray into the Disney element, but my first actual gig was a movie called Saving Private Ryan, and that experience in that it was interesting where not so much the people as the talent as it was the technicians that brought it to life. I've always been the person to not be in the limelight. I've always been the person to see the fruits of my product, the fruits of my work. And I wanted that to speak to what I was able to do. And to be honest, the reason I enjoy doing this is it's a hobby to me. I just happen to make money at it, but it's a hobby to me. I love doing the jobs I do. The technology really excites me, and I like breaking things. I like taking things, that phrase, taking it out of the box, and seeing what it can't do, and seeing what you can to apply it to a new scenario. Because events, even though theater or film or television, they all relatively the same, the applications and the nuances of those applications change, and the asks of your bosses or the clients of the show changes with every different moment. And so you want technology to meet that because it's efficiency. That's what you're looking for. And you want the best bang for the buck. You're looking for the best return on investment for what you're trying to do. Everybody, we're in the business of making money. We're also in the business of making people happy. At least for Disney, that's the magic of Disney. Things that we can do that, like, oh, how did you do that moment? Well, I like making those moments. And I want people to be happy about those types of things and what Disney has to offer. It's the brand that we really want to protect, and how we can recreate certain things that others can't because it just wasn't thought of. This company really has that ability to do that. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun if you can get into this realm.
Well, thank you so much for all of your incredible answers. We want to open up the floor to students. As I explained earlier, please use the raise hand function on Zoom or type your questions in the chat. And then if you're asking questions, please be prepared to unmute your mic. Yeah, so I will start. Oops, sorry about that. Is it Masha?
Yeah.
You can ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much everyone for joining. Really insightful and valuable for us. We appreciate your time a lot. I have a quick question to Walt. So I was just curious, how do you collaborate with other departments within your job and day-to-day activities? It's just like interesting to me. How do you integrate with other departments and in bringing concepts to life generally?
Great question. We have lots of production meetings. Well, first off, we have to find out what the event is, or whether it be a movie premiere, a convention like Comic-Con or D23 or a town hall, whatever the ask is. Then we find out the elements of what that is. So we collaborate with, at least from my role, all the departments that help to bring it together. For example, audiovisual engineering, projection, the stakeholders, the presenters, the content creators, graphic operators, or technicians. You have specific meetings with each of those disciplines about like what my asks are. So my role as a technical director or as the person putting the technical elements together, I come up with a package of what I feel the event needs, or whatever the show is. And then I go to the appropriate vendors or appropriate departments, and we start talking. What do you have? And are you available for? What are the costs? And we start a first pass. I take a look at it. I discuss it with my bosses, and we find out, does this make the most sense for the amount of money we want to spend on it? Is there a better way? Content's the same thing. And in our industry, content-wise is ever changing because ideas are ever changing. People like to come together, have sidebars saying, I like this idea, or our boss may have a better idea. And then we got to come up with a strategy to come up with that. So it all depends on what the ask of that particular item is to collaborate on. But you can't do an effective show without it. It is impossible because at the end of the day, it's going to cost money. And so everybody is accountable to how you spend that money and how did you get the most out of it for what you're trying to create, both on a technical level and on a visual or oral level.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, it seems like it's very collaborative and strategically made kind of job, and it's truly inspiring. And I was also like curious as a follow-up on this one. So like, what kind of background does people have like before joining your team? And what are like the key skills to have in order to navigate and be able to integrate within the new community?
Okay. Was that for me or is that for someone else?
Yep.
Okay. So what I've discovered in my many years is that Disney is it's a difficult company to get into, because a lot of people just want to work for the different lines of businesses, whether it be Disney live action or Marvel or Lucasfilm or Disney animation, and different applications, whether it be marketing, finance, creative elements, or technical elements. But what I think what we need to figure out is um, what makes the most sense for you to get your experience? Is it better to gain experience outside of Disney and then come into Disney with an already set of skills that you've already somewhat honed, and that you're now ready to apply those skills into a job role that you're looking for? I've discovered that many people that apply for jobs already have a skill set that is applicable, or skill sets that are applicable to the role they're trying to apply for. Um, and I'm not going to say this about Disney. I say this about any job. I think that once you get into a job in any company, once a company starts looking at you, you got to be careful about being pigeonholed into a specific role, being looked upon as only doing this as opposed to this. And you want to be known to be diverse. You want to be known that you have imagination, that you have a multitude of skill sets that you're able to apply to different elements of your job or other people's jobs to help them with their jobs. Again, that goes back to collaboration. It's teamwork. And when people recognize those skills, that isn't necessarily attained at Disney, it could be attained outside, whether it be at school, hence the school projects that you work on, team effort, or a team sport. When employers look at that, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at what kind of a team player you are and how effective were you or are you in that space, because it all applies. So I hope that helped answer that part of the question.
No, truly helpful. Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate your response.
Lexi, do you want to ask your question?
Hi. Yeah, I have a couple questions, but I'll only ask like one. I'm a stage management major. I'm a junior, and so I'm getting my BFA, and like I'm taking technical theater classes and all of that. And I was like, oh, this looks like a good panel to be on. But if like whether it's a production that you're working on or a project that you're working on or just in your company in general, this can go for all of you. If you could pinpoint like a central like weakness in whether it's like communication or it's whether it's communication is typically it, but any other sole weaknesses on what projects you're working on, what do you think that they would be? And how can I as an internship kind of help fill that gap?
I guess I'll go first. Yeah, I mean, communication is obviously, we're in a communication business, but communication's can always be rough. And that, like, how an intern can come in and like plug that gap, that's really kind of hard to say, you know? I mean, first you have to get in, which is the hardest part. And then, you know, once you're in, you obviously can't be too aggressive, because then people get, you know, turned off by that. I mean, maybe Disney is different, you know, or Red Bull, but I mean, here we're a small company, and I think it's just coming up with ideas and keeping like a positive attitude. And yeah, I mean, looking for opportunities, and then obviously politically figuring out a way to, you know, execute those solutions and make the company better. And that goes for, you know, my company M3 or Disney or Red Bull. But it is like, you know, it's the real world. And, you know, once you get in, you have to, you know, either figure it out or get out. But I mean, you go to SC, so obviously you're smart, and I'm sure you'll figure it out.
I might add, understand your audience that you're communicating to. So as a stage manager, you have an internal audience. What I'm talking about is your staff, maybe your ASMs, it could be your designers, it could be even your technicians. as opposed to your external people. So let's say it's your vendors, your external people that are, let's say it's an external light designer or a set designer or a set company building your stuff or whatever it may be. Understand who you're talking to. And then what I firmly believe in is verbal communication as opposed to a written communication. Written communication is, I think, great for masses, again, knowing your audience, but to understand how you communicate. We all know, whether it be texting or in email, there's a certain interpretation of how you read it, right? On how you perceive it. And some could be perceived as business, others can be perceived as not so nice. Again, or straightforward, and that's always good. Straightforward, cut to the chase, be professional, polite, all that. But understand who you're talking to, and the communication wise, when it goes to PSM, or stage managing, and you're talking to your group, and you're doing, let's say, your production notes, and so forth like that. Just be careful how you word it, and how you, and who, again, who you're sending it out to, because it could be also forwarded, it could be shared, they're applied all, adding on to, etc. Just keep that in mind.
I would agree with Walt that it's very dependent on your audience and also like the team itself that you're working on. At Red Bull, we have different playgrounds. It's like Red Bull Motorsports, Red Bull Dance, Red Bull Culture, Red Bull Air Force. Like all of these have a different audience on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook. And one thing that I do a lot is write copy for them. So like writing their social media captions. And a lot of times I'll try to like input trends into like what those are. And one that like I got like feedback from recently, I don't know if any of you know like the Costco guys, but they're like, is this a boom or a doom? And like that's like something that's like very trendy right now on TikTok. And there was like a clip from Red Bull Air Force recently where they were like, oh, we're like they did like fireworks out of this plane. So I was like, oh, the caption should just be "We bring the boom." But then the feedback was, oh, like since it's like Air Force related, this is like more serious. Like, and also just like with what's happening in the world, it might be like a little insensitive to like have like jokes like that surrounding a more serious type of playground. So I'd say like that's like one thing really big is just like just know like what that audience is. As far as like a trait across like the whole company, I actually have like a trait that I can like give an answer to. Because Red Bull has all of us take a strengths finder test. It's called like the Gallup Strengths Finder test. And it basically it's like 34 different strengths. And then they gave us like our top 5 to tell us like these are like what you have. But they said like globally, the one strength that Red Bull employees tend to have as like their lowest was discipline, which I thought was really funny. Yeah, so I don't know if that's like a good answer or not, but that is the characteristic that they told us globally the company lacks a little bit.
I think this exemplifies like the challenge you guys are going to face, because there's Disney, which is very corporate. I mean, it's still fun and they're creating amazing content. And then there's Red Bull, which they're having parties and they have playgrounds. I mean, everything's so different, you know?
Something to tag on to that too is that, again, back to the audience piece, it doesn't hurt, especially if you're going to an external vendor or external group outside your group. Maybe have another set of eyes, of a trusted friend or colleague. Take a look at it before you hit send. Just make sure that, from their perspective, does it meet what the messaging is supposed to be? Just food for thought.
Thank you.
Thank you. Christian, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you guys for taking the time to speak with us. I'm wondering, and it was hinted at a little bit at the beginning of the call, but we're entering sort of an era of consolidation within the industry, right? And so I'm wondering, in your opinions, what sort of sectors, jobs, and roles, looking down the pipeline of the next 5 to 10 years, will be most resistant to that trend of consolidation?
Well, why don't you go first?
Well, let's start with the foundational stuff, right? Stuff that isn't going to go away are individuals' skills that make things happen physically, build them. So you're always going to need power for something. So what does that mean? Generators, cable, electricians, lighting. You have to light them so that people can see them. Audio, so you can hear them. Staging people so they have something to stand on. Who's going to build them? Rigging, how are things going to hang? I mean, I can go on and on. My point, though, is that you have to look at the technology that takes away from some of those roles to make their jobs easier or less expensive or safer, right? So what I think is the hardest thing to find is the niche, right? So think of whatever skill set or area that you're interested in and find out what is everybody doing and what are they not doing? And then where can you fit into the not doing to make yourself stand out, where not only can you maybe, like what Andy did, create a company that services that specific need, where and you could see it grow. I mean, that is the, I think the foundation of our industry. It's what is the phrase? The mother is a necessity is the mother of invention.
Mhm.
So with that, because our if industry is so creative, there's so many different avenues you could take to, let's say, slice an apple, and with different tools to slice that apple, how do you make it the most efficient to do that, most cost effective? And going back to toys, what's the thing that people like to use? What do you think they'll pick up on? So trends, I think that trends are ever evolving, and again in this industry, it's a shootout where you're not sure what will work and what will work. You just got to keep an eye out.
Yeah, I mean, that is the cool part too. It is like, consolidation's already happened, Christian, and it's gonna happen even more. But the great part for you guys is there's so many more opportunities just outside of, us three kind of companies, that there's stuff that you can do on your own, like this is the time of the auteur now, and I think, like Walt said, like looking for those opportunities where, you don't really need, an M3 or these kind of companies, like you can just do stuff on your own. Like that to me is where the biggest opportunities are gonna lie in the future.
Yeah, adding on to what Andy said, that was going to be basically exactly what I said. But like after graduation, I kind of thought that I was going to work at like a traditional studio like Disney or like Paramount or something like that. But then I ended up seeing like this job opportunity at Red Bull, where I saw that like even though Red Bull, like the product at the end of the day is the thing that makes money, they still have like a media component to it. Literally, like our Santa Monica office, there's 800 employees who work here, but 450 of those are in marketing and in like the creative space. So it is really cool going to companies that like you might not necessarily think of them as like media companies, but at the end of the day, they do still have that output. Red Bull has like a whole like documentary team that like they follow around a lot of the big athletes with. They have like all these like social media accounts and all of that. So I would say it's like really cool. Like Andy said, it's like kind of like go outside of like what you might see face value and like kind of see what's out there that might not be like traditional entertainment.
Yeah, like Chick-fil-A just opened their own studio. So if you like Chick-fil-A, there you go.
Gotcha. Thank you, guys.
And
Sure.
who would have thought that Amazon would have started that same thing? What they do, they bought MGM. But right, I mean, or Netflix, they started as a DVD rental space, and now what do they become? They went into, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different opportunities where one thing led to another, and where money started coming in, that's where growth happens, right? So start small.
Perfect. There's a question in the chat. So I'll ask that. How do you in your work balance staying relevant as trends constantly cycle while also maintaining an enduring brand?
Oh my
I
gosh.
feel like
I was gonna say that's kind of a mixed bag question. You want to try that, Andy?
How do I stay relevant? Shit. That's a great question. I mean, it's just doing things like this, meeting new people, following trends every day. Like I read as much, news about entertainment as possible, just so I know what's going on. I mean, obviously I'm not like Andrew and I'm not on social media, and he's much more expert at that than I am, but I do know people who are expert like Andrew, and we produce stuff for them all the time. So yeah, I think it's just like trying to stay as fresh as you can, and like you guys have the edge beyond just because you guys are, you know, you're in your 20s, and like that's the present and the future. So that's, now it's kind of depressing, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna try to stay relevant and just keep working hard and making it happen.
Yeah, I would say like staying relevant or like on trends is like one of the biggest parts of my job description. I'm in charge of the marketing like Teams channel where where I basically will drop like this is what's happening on the internet right now. So that's like what all of you can be at whatever company you go to, is being that, like at Red Bull we call it EPC, which is like entry point consumer. So like these are people who are going to be having buying power. And like that's how you like kind of like, you know, appeal to them, is like by hopping on trends. One thing is that like you do have to do it kind of early, and I have like an example of this. Like the summer edition for Red Bull was actually the exact same color as like Charlie XCX's like album. So we were like, oh, it's like the Brat can. But then Kamala Harris, she ended up using Charlie XCX and like Brat as like her whole like campaign. So Red Bull decided to stay clear of like branding it as the Brat can, because they were like, oh, we don't want to get political. So like if we had done it before that had even happened, then we could have made the argument that like, oh, like we already had this planned, but that's not the case. So just like getting onto it as quickly as possible would be one big thing. Also, like just an example of like one fun thing to do as a as like a person who's like in this age range. We have like monthly roundtables every single month where we like talk about like what's relevant like in the news or like online. So literally back in June, I got to give a presentation on like the origins of Brat Summer, and how like Red Bull could have like hopped on that trend a little bit earlier. So it is really cool being tasked as like that like person of like, this is like where you could kind of make yourself valuable in that niche. But I also am realizing that like Gen Alpha is also having like their own set of like lingo. So I had to ask like my little sister what like Sigma meant. I literally was like, wow, I feel like so out of touch. Like there's already like this like vernacular word that like I thought we were like the young generation, but they're creating like their own stuff. So just like asking people on just like what Andy was saying, is like another big thing, is just like having those conversations, doing a panel, talking to people who do fall in that demographic would just be a good way to stay relevant.
And just working with younger people like you.
Perfect. Faith, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. My question is for Andy. So I'm a comm major, but I'm very interested in film and like wanting to get involved, like maybe on the production side. And I was just wondering if you knew like what kind of positions are available and like would be like useful for a comm major that you think could like be seen, I guess, that I could apply for.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many short films shooting around LA. I mean, doing student films, like getting on crews, meeting DPs, meeting producers. I mean, there's a million ways like to find those people and find what they're doing and just connecting with them. And then your circle keeps getting bigger and bigger. And, you know, like Walt was saying, like picking like what you want to do and sticking to that, and, you know, growing from there and doing other stuff and keeping your head down and working hard. Like once you get in and you get the reputation, like it'll continue to grow.
100%.
There's so many opportunities, especially right now.
Yep. And if you're good and people like you, you're going to get called back. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
It just happens again, because there's a shortage of good people and actually well-liked people.
Well liked is huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that a
Thank you,
good
I
answer for you?
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
Is it Hong Kai? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yep, you can call me Hank. Thank you.
You can ask your question.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Hank. Thank you all for sharing your experience. I'm actually a new grad as a USC design student major. I'm actually also a former Disney intern. My question is, do you have any suggestions for new grads? Because we're no longer qualified for, like, say, lots of internship opportunities, and for lots of entry-level jobs, we're competing with people with much more experience, especially in this job market. Like, how do you think we should navigate like this? Thank you.
Well, question for you, Hank, is what kind of you're looking for design work? Is that what I'm hearing? And if it is, what kind of design work are you seeking?
Oh, I am a motion design and graphic designer.
Oh, okay, got it. So I would suggest looking at the smaller companies first, where trailers or editing companies, even video production companies, where you are doing simple work for, how do I say this? Simple work for clients where you are going to be known, because I hate to say it this way, editors are a dime a dozen. I hate to say that, but it's kind of true. So
Not
again,
good editors. Good editors aren't. I mean, that's the problem. Yeah.
yeah, and the problem is to try and get in front of people that can see your work. I think you should always have a portfolio ready to go, because again, you never know who you're going to meet. You never know when they'll say, well, what have you done? Well, can I see it? Do you have something simple where you pop it on your phone? I mean, I've had that happen several times actually while on a job. People ask and I ask and they're able to do that. I'm like, oh, okay. So then I've done many referrals that way. I may not necessarily be the one to hire you but I will certainly be the kind of guy to say, yeah, I'll put my name against that person and recommend that person. Because I think, especially now where I am in my age, where I think mentoring or getting young people into the business and getting them set up for success so that our industry will flourish into the next millennia, if you want to call it, or next century. I hope this goes on forever, but I think it's part of our duty to do that. And there's that whole adage of you need to know someone to work on a union gig, yet you have to be union to work on a gig. It's that vicious cycle. Does it happen? Yes. Does it happen all the time? No. A lot of independents work. I've hired many independents before that work for vending companies. Like, I'll give you an example, Sweetwater, or for Creative Technology, or for other audio companies, ATK. My point being is that when you start getting experience, I'm talking about hands-on dirty experience, and into where you're applying real world applications and making it work on a very time limited basis and being successful, that says a lot. So it's not only the showing up on time, it's working backwards. Hence the reason about working in theater. There's always a show time. You have to work backwards from the show time. So the show's going to start no matter what, but your performance level will be judged on the quality of how you deliver on time, on budget, and with a smile, for lack of better. And that's the truth.
And my answer to you, Hank, is that, I mean, you have to figure it out, you know? Like, no one, if you are going up against people who, you know, who already have jobs or experience, like, you're gonna have to meet someone who likes you and trusts you and gives you the advantage over that person, or, you know, just meeting as many people. And if you want a job in the business, you have to just go for it and try to figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
I was also
gonna be, yeah, go ahead, Andrew. I'm so sorry.
Sorry. Oh no, you guys are good. I was gonna say also there's a lot of like rotational programs that are around that a lot of companies have to, specifically if you have like less experience. Like the program that I'm in, it's like the graduate program, and you rotate onto 3 different teams within like your like vertical. So that was like something that I really liked, was like they literally made this role for someone who like doesn't have as much experience as like a specialist or anything like that might have. Another piece of advice would just be like, when I like applied to like full-time jobs, I did a lot more like quality than quantity. Some of my friends applied to like 200 to 400 jobs. I applied to 8 jobs. And I just like networked at those companies specifically. Before I had my final round interview at Red Bull, I went to the Annenberg Career Center and I was like, hey, is there anyone that like I could be put into contact with? And I got 3 different names. So I ended up having chats with all 3 of them before I even went into my final round interview. And one of the people even offered to like listen to like my final case study and my self presentation before I even got to that final round. So by the time I got to like those two 2 days of like full final round interviews in person, I was like, oh, I have this in the bag. Like, I know like this was already got approved by someone. And I felt a lot more confident in myself because I had talked to these 3 people. They all gave me advice about like, this is like kind of like what company culture is like. So I was able to speak to like that in my interview. So just like being able to like speak to a lot more about the company, not just like things that you would have like looked on at Line, could be another good thing that could like kind of set you apart from the rest. And then also I think even though like hard skills and like experience is one thing, also like making sure you remain creative is equally important. Because for the final round interview, we had to do like a 10-minute self presentation as part of it, and the only instruction that they gave was in 10 minutes tell us like who you are as a person. That is a super open-ended question, and I was like, oh, like I don't know, I could just like run through my resume. But then I was like, I think like that's what everyone's gonna do. So what I did instead was I basically said how I was a Red Bull variety pack and how different parts of my personality connected to a different can flavor or edition. And they really liked that because Red Bull's like whole mission is like connecting consumer to can. And I read that online. I was like, oh, perfect. So I'm going to make my self presentation about that. So it had almost nothing about my work experience. It was mostly like, this is who I am as a person. And then when I had like the actual like one-on-one interview after I gave my like creative presentation, I was like, okay, I know that like that was a more creative route. Now I'd love to take you through my actual experiences. So I found like being creative in those final round interviews instead of just like maybe like sticking to like what everyone else might be doing could be another good thing to set you apart in that final stretch.
Yeah, that's genius. Like that's amazing. Congratulations. That's so cool.
Thank
Well
you.
done. That's well done.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. We have one question in the chat, and then I think we'll finish up with Masha's question. But before I get to that, what are some challenges you faced in your role, and how does the company support its employees as they look to grow and level up in their skills and responsibilities?
I mean, challenges I face in my role is that like I'm creative, but then I also run this company, and it's like you not only have to look ahead and see what's happening in our business with AI and with consolidation and everything else, but then I also need to look around me and make sure that I'm being creative and we're delivering great content and the staff is, is happy and growing. And for me, like I don't really care about roles, I just want people to do their best and to be their best. And so I always just let people do whatever they need to do. If they want to grow here, they can grow here. And if it works out, then, it's better for everybody. And if they want to go somewhere else, I completely support that, and help them get, a job there as much as possible. I mean, it's just like real life with your friends, except it's in a business. Like that's the way I like to run my business, just because it's small. Other companies may do it differently.
Challenges wise, is always time. Because the company wants to be efficient with their employees, but also with the brands, because there's so many different, at least on the event side, there are so many different elements to look at and logistics to handle. What's nice about Disney is that there are a lot of resources. There are a lot of people that do lots of different things. So for me, at least, sometimes to identify what those resources are, because it's not like it's in a catalog. So you have to go to your colleagues. This is where collaboration you ask. You just ask the simple question, hey, help, who can help me? Or your bosses will say, do you need help in because of whatever? They'll look at your, are you stretched? Are you stretched too much? Are you able to effectively do whatever's asked of you? And there's that phrase of work-life balance. Well, I believe in it, but I also believe in hard work. Work hard, you play hard, right? And I think the balance is whatever you discover is balanced. My balance is different than everybody else's on this call. Because I come from a different generation. Doesn't mean my generation's better than anybody else's. It's just what I know, right? So I know what I can do and can't do. And how effective I do will be different than what anybody else does on this call. My point being is that I think it's to identify what the limitations of whatever your job is, what limitations of other people's jobs are, and how do you put that all together, especially if you're in charge of, let's say, a show or of whatever it may be, some type of a leadership role, and putting together the limitations of every other team, knowing whatever that they're stretched on their own projects, and putting together a product that stays with the brand. It stays what's Disney or what's Marvel or what's Lucasfilm, right? Because at the end of the day, your customers are your guests, people who are watching and listening. That's all they care about is, are they coming across or coming away with the best feeling of whatever they just experienced? Now, the question is, how did it get there? The people that watch it don't care how it got there, but I do, because our people are the ones that have to actually do it, right? So that's a challenge. I think that our company provides a vast number of opportunities to, let's just say, let off steam, to talk to people, we have an open door policy on our leadership. It's wonderful. We could talk about anything. But knowing that it is still a work environment, right? You can chat, you can talk, but as long as the work keeps going, moves forward, doesn't stay stagnant, and that people are happy with what they do, I think that's half the battle right there. That's just my perspective. And I think that's for skills. How do you look to grow and level up their skills and levels? Well, I think as a leader, your job is to lift them up as much as possible. What they feel that they're short on in terms of what they think they can do, you give them a challenge to make them feel that they can succeed in whatever that is, and help them by giving them opportunities or giving the tools to succeed. Our industry is not only soft, it's also hard skills. So you need computer skills. In this case, yes, it's the typical Microsoft Office or Mac Keynote, but you need to know computer-aided drafting. You have to understand editing. You have to understand physics when it comes to like audio or light. I can go on and on. My point, though, is that not everybody knows everything. I certainly don't. And I look to people that know hopefully more than I do in a certain area, but that's also how you learn, so that you can speak more intelligently on whatever it is that you're trying to lead them on. That's my
I'll
perspective.
add something really quick as well. I would say one challenge was the team that I'm on specifically. It got created last year, so literally all of our job responsibilities get built out literally day by day. Half the stuff that was in my job responsibility when I started in June have like doubled, so like I'm doing totally new things, and that's been like really fun. I'm like getting to explore all these, asking teams like where can I fit into like this larger picture. And I think like not the company itself, but I would say like having a great manager or like just being very communication has been mentioned a lot on this call. But my manager is very communicative, and I feel like I am as well. So just like communicating our standards with one another, how we like best take feedback, whatever that might be, has been one thing that has helped me kind of like I guess like excel. And then another challenge, this is a little bit like outside the role, and I'll just like say this since like this is like a lot of people who will be like graduating in the next year. I think another challenge was just like finding like my footing post graduation, because it was like that kind of like hit me like a truck. It was crazy because like on the first day I started work, my dad was like, "You have health insurance to your company now, so you have to go do that." And so like figuring out things like health insurance, like deferring money into a Roth IRA, all of that, they do not teach you that at USC. So just like doing. I literally looked at TikTok a lot. I literally like Googled like what's the best like funds to like distribute whatever, all of that on TikTok. I looked at like budget sheets on TikTok as well. I asked my other friends who were starting work around the same time and to be like, hey, like, how did you do this? Whatever. And also people in my program, we literally will have like meetings where we're like, okay, we'll sign up for like the healthcare together, or we'll sign up for like this together. So just like leaning on the support systems in your life as well could be good for some things that might be outside of your role as well, that come with graduating and starting that next step.
Hey, Andrew, can I ask you a question really quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So like how, as someone who's just graduating, like how is it what you expected? Like is the corporate world, like, is it clean? Is everything like regimented or is it kind of messy?
Oh, that's like such a great question. I think like Red Bull specifically is the most chill company ever. I could not imagine a more chill place to be honest. Our CEO, like our CEO, his name's Chris Hunt. He comes in with a bright t-shirt, board shorts, and flip-flops every single day into the office. So I feel like what I say about corporate life might be a little bit different. But as far as like is post grad what I expected, I would say honestly, no. I didn't expect to have so much free time. I thought I was going to be busier with like having like a full-time job, but I'm actually not as busy. So I found like I have time to do hobbies, which has been really fun. Because when you're a student, you do your classes all day, you do an internship, and then you have to do homework, you have to study. But post grad, you have literally outside of the 8 to 5, or like, some people might be going to consulting or anything like that. So you might have worse hours than that. But usually after your work hours are done, the time is yours. And I think that was like the hardest adjustment graduating, was just realizing I have so much time, how can I fill it? And a lot of that has been like stuff that has been like focused on like my own like well-being. Like I've gotten back into running, I like cook pretty much all my meals for dinner, so it's been really cool finding that time. But yeah, a little bit different than what I thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is it's an interesting selection of people who work in the business world. Is that one's Disney, which is very corporate, another is like very lax, and then I'm like, I work 24/7, so it's all different, and it just shows like how many different kind of opportunities there are for you guys to figure it out and to do something great.
Definitely agree. And that all your diverse perspectives are appreciated, and I'm sure our students are learning so much. So I appreciate that a lot. Masha, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that like I really like this idea, and it really resonated with me when you said about the like networking, working on sets, and how people keep inviting you if you're like just a good and genuine person, competent, I guess too. And I just experienced it in past year, and I've been working a lot on like graduate student film sets, and it's just insane how like in a few months I was able to create my own team, and we did like our short film this summer. So yeah, definitely like everyone who is here and wants to like participate in student film sets, feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to help. But generally, like in my school, I'm a finance student pursuing my progressive degree program and like master's program right now. And I was very interested like in production finance side of film in the future, and maybe like in the long term, more like producing. So that's why like coordinating events, planning, budgeting is sounds very exciting to me. And I wanted to ask you, as someone like who has producing experience, and do you have any recommendations for person who is interested entering producing field as of today?
Who's that for? For me?
Everyone who can help. That
Yeah, I
would
mean,
be
I think it's the same. I mean, I don't want to speak too generally, but yeah, I think it's the same it's like all the other fields, it's trying to align what you're going to do now with what you want to do in the future. And that may or may not happen, but certainly like if you start near there, you can veer toward there, like try to get a job as a producer's assistant, work on commercials, is like even intern, like working for free on a commercial with a producer, and you get to know them, and then slowly you get on their team, and then next thing you know, you can jump to film, or you can jump to docs, or where, I mean, there's a million opportunities. And you guys, the good part about being young is that, your overhead is low, and you can afford to work 2 jobs, or you can afford to work at a lesser rate, you know what I mean? And that is such a huge advantage. So I would definitely take advantage of that.
Thank you.
Take a look at production companies, and I'm talking about whether it be film or event. They're relatively the same. You get experience in the field, hands dirty, if you want to call it that, where you're deep diving into everybody's business, especially as a producer or line producer. You get to have a really in-depth look into what everybody's jobs are and their roles and their departments. I could speak specifically to events. We have a company we use quite a bit for turnkeying a lot of the scenic elements, from the design of the scenic elements to the build, or even producing a certain amount of items. And they have a lot of people of young age that come in and PA, or they will come in and benchmark the producers or whatever the people are doing there on gigs. Again, it also goes back to the vendors. So whether it be an audio vendor, a lighting vendor, a video vendor, they have the same structure. They'll have people that will help their people, their leaders to support and to finish the product. What I think is most important is to get your hands dirty. That's a long story short. And to take your soft skills and apply it to the hard skills. And really not only just learning from that, but I think also taking away and what can you do it with it on your own projects. And I learned from an early on working in tech theater that my best years were as technician. And I got to really watch and observe the stage managers, the directors, the designers, and understand what their role is, but also how their role could make my role as a technician easier. So if I could do my job and their job and understand their job, once I get to that level, it makes life so much easier because now I could talk that language because I've done it. So going to your point, Masha, if you can speak the speak intelligently, you'll not only be able to communicate what you want done, you could also identify the people that are trying to blow smoke on a conversation and not knowing what they're talking about, and you'll be able to identify that. I mean, I think that's just as important as a producer, because you obviously as a producer, you're the money person, right? You want to be able to spend the money where it's best used to create the idea, yet stay on budget, or preferably make some money. That would be the better idea. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it so much.
Great. We have one more question in the chat, and I think we'll wrap up with this one. Lexi's asking, what was something you did when you entered the field that was maybe unfamiliar, but helped you continue absorbing all the skills that you learned throughout your career?
These are great questions. Andrew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I feel like I'll probably have the shortest answer. But but one thing that was unfamiliar with for me when I first started was a lot of what I do is like add articles to the website. So website building was something that I had like no experience in whatsoever. But getting tasked with like adding articles from like the world of Red Bull onto the website just made me aware of what was happening in the company globally. So I would say like that was something that like, even though was it my favorite thing to do? Probably not. Did I know how to do it before? No, but it did give me direction. I realized, oh, this is why my manager had me do that. Now I know like the global priorities, the global projects, and so I'm thankful that like I had that task when I first started. But yeah, that's my short answer, since my career has been a cool 4 months now. So
Well, you want to go, or do you
Oh,
want me to
Andy,
go?
go for it. Go for it.
Okay. I mean, for me, literally, I would say everything that, when I entered the field, like I was unfamiliar with everything. Like at SC, you learn, yeah, I mean, you can shoot and you can edit and you can write, but then in the real world, it's always, I mean, those are your foundational skills, but in the real world, it's always going to be different, and someone's going to want it done differently. And I mean, you're always learning. Like that's the thing. Like I thought maybe when I left SC, I was going to be like, this is it. But then I still learn. Like I'm learning. I'm shooting on a volume. An LED screen this week. So it's like you're always learning new stuff, and that you always have to continue. I mean, that's what it's all about, I think.
I agree. I think technology would be the biggest challenge because it's ever changing. I'll try and use a very specific example. So for many of you, I've gone to the movies. Some of you may have seen a movie in 3D. Well, that wasn't always like that. And so when film was just actually on 35 millimeter material being shown, 3D wasn't a thing. It was just 2D and you were watching a film. Whereas when digital cinema or the digital age came into play, 3D became an option, but nobody wanted to see what we called our grandparents' glasses, the different colored glasses called anaglyph. They're red and green, red and blue. Nobody wants to watch a movie like that. So the technology to be able to see a film in real color, in real brightness, became the technology challenge. So we had different versions called Real D or Dolby 3D, and now it's called Dolby Vision, different variants. But I was on the very beginning elements of the 3D parts of the history. And I was with DreamWorks Animation at the time. And part of my role was, or specifically asked, was to travel with the CEO globally and push 3D to the exhibitors and show them what it can do. And the biggest challenge, because 3D was still brand new, I can tell you with less than a handful of people that understood how it worked in the field. Part of my thing was to make it work in the field with existing equipment that should be doing it, but wasn't, let's say the firmware wasn't updated, or the screen wasn't correct, or the server wasn't correct. To be able to fix those elements before the boss came in and do it. And sometimes if it would break, how did you fix it? So there were a lot of learnings in the field. That was a huge challenge. It was a technology challenge. But one of the nice things I've learned about that, thankfully, is that sent me, before I got sent out into the field, I went to Real D and I went to Dolby, and they told me exactly how stuff worked. Now, did they tell me how to fix it? Because they didn't, not yet, because they don't know what they don't know. We don't know when it's broken. They don't know how to fix it yet, right? So I had to break it by actually using it. Didn't happen all the time, but when it did, you're in a show moment, you have to fix it. And again, it goes to your diagnostic skills. How well do you know the technology? How well do you know how not only the process of 3D, how well do you know the equipment that's replicating that? There's a whole bunch of stuff. So my point, though, is that this is stuff that you can't learn at school. This is stuff you have to literally take the technology, the manuals, the technical manuals, and literally read it. And I'm not talking about just the operator manual. I'm talking about the technical manuals to understand and apply whatever that is, figure it out, and then fix it. That was the biggest challenge for me. And but you know what? I feel that was one of the best feelings, because you feel a level of accomplishment. And that just pushed that niche for me. That's what I discovered, my niche in digital cinema. That's how my role, my name got to know in this industry, is because I became one of the very few people that people were calling constantly to come work and do their shows. So, and that wasn't with Disney at the time. Disney has its own very capable staff, and they were the forefront of technology. DreamWorks wasn't really at that point. So there were major players, and DreamWorks was one of them. And so I was very lucky to be part of that process. So to answer your question, you're always learn on your own, and never rely on I know everything, or I know just enough. Keep going. Even now, I still keep reading a lot on stuff because it's always changing.
Well, I think those were all incredible answers. Thank you all so much. A couple students are asking in the chat if there's a good way for our students to reach out to you if possible, as well as Andy specifically. They're asking if M3 has an internship program and if there's any information on that.
Oh gosh, we used to. I mean, I know there's a bunch of. I mean, can you put me? I mean, if you want to put people in touch with me, that's cool, for sure.
Okay.
Okay, awesome.
I will in the chat. Now, please don't bombard me or put me on weird stuff. My email is in the chat. Feel free to email me with questions. I don't answer immediately because I could be on a show or whatever, but feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And if I don't know something, I'll find the answer. If you happen to find, let's say, an internship that you're interested in on the job website, reach out to me and send me a link, and then we'll have a Zoom call. And so I understand what you're trying to do. Maybe I can find the recruiter and maybe put you in touch with them and go from there. So I can try and help out at least with that part. But there's no guarantees, right?
Well, once again, thank you all so much. I want to thank our amazing panelists for sharing their industry insights with us, and as well as our students for attending. I hope this gave everyone a better idea about the entertainment industry overall. And this is just a reminder that Industry Insights is a series of panels. So we also have some for marketing and PR, nonprofit, law and advocacy. So those are all coming up relatively soon. Also take advantage of Internship SC, as well as anything that's on Handshake or our website. You can scan the QR code and find more information as registration is open for most of our events. And that is it. Thank you all again so much for coming. I really appreciate our panelists' time and our students. I hope you gained something from this.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
setting this up.
Thank you.
guys.
Good
Bye.
luck, everybody. And again, reach out, keep learning. That's the simplest thing I could say. Keep learning.
Thank you so much, all.
All right, you guys. Have a great day, great evening.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Bye.